Hello, bookworms. Welcome back to the Bonafide Bookworm. I'm your host, Rachel, and if you're here to read along with me and improve your English. A few things. So, I didn't mention this last time, but my distance is off because I have a Christmas tree in the way. And I would like to show it to you all, but it is not done. Yes, I know Christmas is next week. This is how I am. It is what it is. So anyway, the long-awaited comparison, Practical Magic book to Practical Magic movie, is finally here. I know, you all are thrilled. So I have a list. It's like a crazy long list. If I can, I'm gonna try to pop it up over here somewhere. So to start off with, we'll start with the book. And I will put a tag on here to let you know when to pop back in because this is going to be full of spoilers if you haven't read the book or seen the movie, just so you know. And if you don't care, then just continue to watch, whatever. So, in the book, it's been years. Sally's character, which is played by Sandra Bullock, she has two daughters, and they're teenagers by the time all the stuff that happens in the movie happens. Jillian also was with Jimmy, the bad guy, for quite a bit longer than what the movie portrayed. I think she was actually married to him. I can't remember. I'll have to check that. She got married a few times. And something else that they kind of, they showed it, but they didn't show it. Apparently it was an abusive relationship for quite a while. So they didn't really make that too clear in the movie. They acted like it was just this one-time thing that he hit her and this and that. That wasn't the case. In the book, he was very abusive in many different ways, and she was giving him, I want to say nightshade. I don't even know if that's a real thing or what, to try to knock him out and make him go to sleep. And she thinks that she accidentally kills him by giving him too much, which turns out not to be the case in the book. Turns out he died from an overdose or something with his heart. I can't remember, but they end up determining that she didn't kill him somehow. I can't remember how. But anyway, in the movie, they have Sally, Sandra Bullock's character, attack him. And she is the one who put nightshade all in his beer. So she thinks she killed him, which is, again, a huge difference. Another thing in the book, Sally, Sandra Bullock's character, she moves away. She moves to another state because she doesn't want her daughters to grow up in that little town because they are known as witches, and they were very mean to her and Jillian, and then they were being mean to her, or she was afraid they would be mean to her daughters if she had kids. In the movie, she stays in the town with her husband. She moves back in with the aunts when her husband dies. Something else that bothered me about the movie adaptation was which I love that house, which, just so you know, because I looked it up, that house isn't real. It was just a house that they built to get shots. It wasn't even a real house. It was just shots for the outside, and then everything else that happened indoors was just created on a sound stage, which I hate because I love that house. It is so cool. I would live there. So I was dang, I would live there. I could afford a house like that. But anyway, it made me kind of sad to know that a house doesn't exist out there like that because it's lovely. But in the book, the house is supposed to be kind of dark. It was supposed to be built by Maria, the original Owens chick. That was also different at the beginning of the movie. She did not almost hang. She just lived there. Yes, she was pregnant by a man in another town, and everyone did think she was a witch and things like that. But she wasn't banished to an island by herself like the movie has. She did curse love in general, just that It, like in the movie, they make it that the curse is that the Owens women basically won't have love, that it's always going to end in tragedy. Whereas in the book, it's more just more of a warning, like don't fall in love because it's going to end badly. You're just going to be heartbroken. So something else about that was in the movie, that's part of the reason Sally, as a little girl, makes a spell for a boy that doesn't exist. Like he's supposed to have one green eye, one blue eye. He's supposed to ride a horse backwards. His favorite symbol is a star. Well, in the movie, it makes it like that the character she ends up with came to her, like she called to him as a child by creating this spell. And it's also good because in the movie it's very romantic because she's like, we can't be together because basically we won't know if it's true or if it's because of this spell I did. And she was like, because I wished for you. And one of his good lines in that movie is, well, I wished for you too. So it's a good line, it works. But that never happened in the book. She never did something like that. And the book is much more practical too, in the sense of like, it's just odd things happen around them, but it's not necessarily magical. Okay. I became Mr. Mackey. Okay. So let's see. The aunts in the movie, they also cast a spell on Sally to fall in love with her first husband. That did not happen in the book. In the book, she fell in love with him because she fell in love with him. That was that. There was a death beetle that she heard, but it was in the house that they heard it. It wasn't like part of any particular spell or anything, but I didn't like that in the movie, that they basically cursed her to fall in love, because it just made it seem not true that she did actually fall in love with him, her husband. Something else, they made Kylie, well, again, the children, Kylie and Antonia, those are Sally's kids in the book and the movie. But in the book, they grow up. Like I said, they're like teenagers by the time all this stuff happens with Jimmy and Jillian in the movie, where Jimmy is killed and they're dealing with his ghost and all that stuff. And all of that stuff is happening at Sally's house out in another state, another place. It's not happening at the aunt's house. But they kind of switched up a lot of that. Antonia is not the one that is supposed to be able to see ghosts and stuff. In the movie, she sees Jimmy's ghost out in the garden. That's supposed to actually be Kylie, the younger sibling, the one with the dark hair. Again, she's supposed to be like a teenager. She's supposed to be like 15, 16 when she sees him. She can also see like auras around people. And Antonia's gift is kind of like Jillian's gift in that she's just like really beautiful and gets all this attention that she doesn't necessarily always want. So yeah, they really swapped that stuff out. Also, in the book, Jillian does come to live with Sally at her own separate house, and she falls in love, truly in love, with a teacher in the town. And he's like the kindest, sweetest, like most gentle man she's ever met. He's like super handsome and all this. And so she kind of has this fight with herself about falling in love with him because of what she experienced with Jimmy. And so it's a really good story. I hate that they couldn't incorporate that into the movie, but I'm hoping maybe in the second one, maybe it'll be about maybe Jillian falling in love. I don't know. Let's see. What else? Oh yeah, like, okay, so in the book, Sally's a vegetarian, and they kind of alluded to this in the movie a little bit. because when they're little, they see their aunts kill a dove or something for a spell for this woman, and it just really upsets Sally. Like, she's super sensitive, like in general, just with creatures, with people. Like, that's kind of her magic, is that she's a sensitive person, and it just really upset her, so she becomes a vegetarian. Versus in the movie, all you see is that they do kill that dove, and it upsets her as a child, but it doesn't quite go into you don't really see anything saying for sure like she's a vegetarian. Let's see. Oh, and the ants in the book, like, they lean in hard to being witches. Like, they think it's kind of funny, and they wear black all the time. They wear black skirts. They wear black boots, black hats. And in Practical Magic, the movie, they made them very light, I guess. Like, their clothes were lighter, just like the house. Like, everything was just a little bit lighter, which I guess they did to make it more marketable, possibly. I don't know. And in the book, they don't fly off the roof at the end. I never understood that in the movie. Like, I guess they were just trying to give it this Hollywood storybook ending, like with the music and all this, and like the other women coming together in the town to get Jimmy's spirit out of Jillian. But that doesn't happen in the book. In the book, people are still kind of like, they're kind of odd, you know, but I guess they were really trying to hone in on that, you know, women coming together and taking care of each other, which I did like in the movie, but I felt like it missed out on kind of one of the points of the book is all about family. It's kind of like, there's this one part in the book where the daughters, Antonia and Kylie, had like argued or whatever, and they're like teenagers now. Like, Antonia was just always really mean to her little sister, and like there's this one particular part where Antonia just takes care of Kylie, and it's like Antonia never says she's sorry for how she treated her, but she starts treating her differently, and it's just one of those unspoken things that they understand. It's like her way of apologizing and showing her love for her sister. And I think it's one of those sibling type things. Like, you don't have to say you're sorry, because you know each other. You grew up together. You understand what they're not saying. You can feel it. And I feel like the movie missed out on making that special bond with your family. And that's kind of the point, like I said, of the books, is family. Sisters, moms, daughters, aunts. Like, it's very much girl power-ish to an extent, but it's more focused on the family. And let's see, another thing, I think I'd mentioned, like, I wasn't crazy about the guy that they picked to be Sandra Bullock's love interest in the movie, but after I watched it again, I was like, yeah, I can see that. I can see him working as the love interest. I think in my head, I pictured more of a, what's his name from Justified? Timothy Oliphant, something like that. That's what I kind of pictured in my head from the description of the book. But that guy works. He's fine. And then the last thing I'm going to say, and I think I mentioned this before, is the book really surprised me. The way Alice Hoffman wrote it, I just really feel like she spent some time in the South or something. It's supposed to take place in Massachusetts, and I've never been to Massachusetts, and I don't know what it's like in the summer, but she talks a lot about how humid it is and how sticky it is, and it's like, okay, that is the South all over. Like, it is very hot, very humid, very sticky. Like, you walk outside and you're drenched in sweat. And she really did a great job of pulling that in, and it makes me want to kind of like just go to Massachusetts in the summer and see what it's like, because I don't know. But anyway, that's all on my rant for the book. If you're tuning back, the book and the movie, if you're tuning back in, welcome back. We'll get on with reading Saving Sadie. I'm gonna try to look up some stuff, see if I can find anything about the new movie, because I'm so freaking excited for that movie. And I hope, like I said, I hope they're able to incorporate some things from the book. Like maybe it's gonna touch more on her daughter's teenage years, which works. That's fine. And I also hope that it does keep that character from the movie that she fell in love with, and in the book, Sally's character. I hope it keeps that. It's kind of like, okay, I've talked a lot about Outlander, and one of the things I read Diana Gabaldon saying was that, you know, there's all these books about romance and falling in love and all that, and it just kind of ends. And it's like, life doesn't end. It continues on. And so one of the things about her books is that she wanted to write a book about marriage. She wanted to write a book about what happens after. And I would like to see that reflected in the new movie. Like, okay, they fell in love. Great. They're together. Can they just still be in love? Can they do that in the movie? I really hope so. It's kind of like Bones. People expected the TV show Bones to just kind of end once David Boreanaz and Emily Deschanel's characters got together, but it didn't. And it was actually so good. Like, I enjoyed it that when they finally got them together and continued the storyline. So I hope they do something different with the second Practical Magic. I guess we'll just have to wait to see. I don't know, maybe they'll go back in time and tell more of Maria's story, which I think it's called The Rules of Magic, but I want to read that next and see what that's like. So anyway, back to Saving Sadie by Joal, Derse, Dauer, with Elizabeth Ridley. And when we left off, Joel had left Sadie to get that bullet taken out and her cyst, and she's thinking back to how she felt like when one of her daughters was really sick and in the hospital as a kid, and how just worried she is. And I think we've all been there when we have a loved one undergoing a procedure and you just feel so helpless. Like, you want to be there, but it's like, what are you going to do? You're just going to sit there. Like, they're in surgery. You literally can do nothing. You can't even like hold their hand. So I think we all understand that. So anyway, we are on page 104, about midway down. Fortunately, I was able to phone the clinic several times during the day while at work, getting periodic updates on Sadie's status. I was so relieved when I received word that the surgery was over and had gone well. Both the bullet from her forehead and the cyst from her tail had been successfully removed, and she was resting comfortably. When at last work finished for the day and I rushed back to the clinic, Dr. Witt was with a patient, so Dr. Jody took me in to see Sadie. Poor Sadie, she was still quite groggy and barely seemed to recognize me as she slowly lifted her head from the pile of blankets surrounding her, and her amber eyes struggled to focus. The fur on her forehead had been shaved down to the skin, and she had 6 or 7 large green stitches closing an incision that went from above her eyebrows, between her eyes, and down to the base of her snout. Dr. Jody explained that the surgery hadn't taken long. The bullet was fairly close to the surface, thanks to the poultice, and hadn't gone into the bone. Then Dr. Jody reached into her pocket and pulled out a cylindrical metal object. "Here it is," she said, holding the object up to the light. Fortunately, it hadn't fragmented and came out in one piece. A chill arced through me as I realized she was holding the bullet. To actually see it with my own eyes was shocking and sobering, bringing home the reality that Sadie had actually been shot with a real gun and real bullets, and by a real human being who chose to do this to her. Seeing the actual bullet made it so much more real. On one hand, I was glad to think that this cold, hard piece of metal was no longer embedded inside Sadie's body. But it also reminded me that the bullet and shrapnel in her back, those many pieces of cold, hard metal, too numerous to count, could never be removed, and she would carry those cruel reminders of the worst day of her life inside of her forever. Dr. Jody continued by explaining that the surgery on the cyst had actually been more extensive than that on her forehead, since the cyst was larger and deeper than suspected. They chose not to close the incision with stitches because it would heal better if left open. And as Dr. Jody showed me the area, I was shocked to realize that so much tissue had been removed that I could see the tendons in Sadie's tail. How much more was this poor dog going to have to endure, I wondered. You'll need to let Sadie soak in the bathtub twice a day for 20 minutes each time, then treat and rebandage her tail, Dr. Jody explained. You'll need to do this for at least 2 weeks, and no more swimming for Sadie for at least a month until her tail is fully healed. Wait a minute, you mean put her in my tub? The one in my bathroom? I asked incredulously. About once a week, I'd been giving Sadie a full bath in the kiddie pool in the yard, while at least once a day I was spot washing her, especially her back end, with rags and towels and a pitcher of water. No doubt Sadie and I had grown close, but I'd never placed a dog in my own bathtub before and couldn't fathom starting now. Well, yes, Dr. Jody replied, looking slightly annoyed as her brown eyes narrowed. That would be the best way to do it, of course. Fast forward a few hours to that evening, and there I was in my master bathroom, lifting Sadie from the floor, steadying her in my arms, and carefully lowering her into my bathtub filled with warm, soapy water. I seriously hope you appreciate this, I told her as I wet a washcloth and began wiping her shoulders and chest. Still groggy from her surgery, she looked at me with hazy, melted caramel eyes, but otherwise didn't react. I washed her gently, avoiding the stitches on her head, and once the bandage on her tail had been softened enough by the water, I cut it off with a pair of scissors and cleaned the open wound. After taking her out of the tub and drying her, I laid Sadie on the floor and tried not to look at the exposed tendons as I treated her tail with the ointment Dr. Jody had prescribed, which resembled a thick red Vaseline. Then I bandaged the wound as she had taught me, first wrapping it with gauze and then finishing with the black vet wrap that was thin, snug, and highly adhesive. Sadie was an ideal patient as always, never barking or nipping or complaining. She would just lie on her side and look at me, doe-eyed and placid, as if biding her time until I was finished. So twice a day for 2 weeks, I bathed Sadie in my bathtub and let her soak for 20 minutes before and after work. This became just another element that was added to our morning and evening routine, which now included outdoor potty time on her own, diaper changes, feedings, supplements, and exercises, along with the 20-minute baths. Sometimes I felt overwhelmed and exhausted by the sheer time and energy all this took. But in those moments, I would tell myself, be strong and stay the course. Remember, you're doing this for Sadie. It won't always be this way. It won't be like this forever. When her tail heals, when she's stronger, when she's better, when she's walking again. During these intense weeks of bathing and healing, I was greatly anticipating a 5-day trip to Louisville, Kentucky, to attend the National Convention of the RROC, the Rolls-Royce Owners Club, Lake Michigan region. Cars have always been one of my passions. I've been a car guy since the age of 14, even before I learned to drive. I was fortunate enough to have been elected to the club's board of directors and was so looking forward to the national convention and the trip to Louisville, including a side trip to Churchill Downs, famous home of the Kentucky Derby. The trip to Kentucky had been scheduled well before I adopted Sadie, and the travel and accommodations had already been paid for. I had really hoped I could go, hoped that Sadie would be well enough that Jeff could keep her overnight and drop her off at Dr. Jody's during the day. I was excited about getting a break and the chance to rest and recharge my batteries. But as the days went on, it was becoming more and more evident that I couldn't leave Sadie. Although healing, she was still in rough shape, and I knew the intense rehab schedule we'd been sticking to couldn't be compromised or interrupted. So it was with a heavy heart that I called my friends from the club and told them I wouldn't be able to make the trip to Kentucky after all, because Sadie needed me too much. They were supportive and seemed to take the news well, but deep down I wondered if they thought I was crazy for canceling a trip because of my dog. My family, other than my stalwart supporter Marnette, were struggling to accept how much Sadie had taken over my life. Was I at risk of losing my friends now, too? We'll stop there, page 108, because we got a nice little page break again. You know, when you're going through hard times, or just hearing, like, okay, I'll give a good example. One of my dogs, when he gets really excited, he has this really high-pitched bark that it feels like it's just going straight to your brain, and it's just, you know, right in your brain. But in those moments of frustration or irritation, whether it's a person or a dog or whatever the situation is, I always remind myself to be grateful for it, because it sounds a little crazy maybe, but things move so fast in life and change so fast. And I know when you're in a bad time, it feels like it's never going to change. And when you're in a good time, it's true, time flies by. But the fact of the matter is, it will change. And at some point, you're going to look back and say, gosh, I remember when so-and-so did this, or my dog did that. And you'll enjoy it, hopefully with a sense of appreciation and fondness that you had that time with them, whether it was a dog or a person. So if you're experiencing that, like Joel, just remember, try to take it for what it is for now, because it's not always going to be there. Anyway, I hope y'all have a great day, week, month, year, wherever you're at. I'm always saying wherever you're at. Have a great day, and I hope you come back here. Bye.